All right, what's up, everybody? Good to be hanging with y'all on a Wednesday again. I've missed you. We didn't do an InnerVerse yet this week due to some unforeseen scheduling mishaps. Basically, I had two shows lined up. Neither one happened. So these things, they occur. No big deal. Use the opportunity to make some back-end improvements and update the old website. So stuff's going really well. It's good to see Stacy here in the chat. Potato, Coco. Who else we got? Y'all are a little slow to trickle in tonight. See the pun I made there? Trickle. Didn't even do it on purpose, but I'm just on auto pun mode. I'm excited. This is going to be a really fun stream. Always a huge pleasure to hang with the greats, the M's, as I like to call them around here. Michelle and Mario. Michelle of Michelle's Healing Home, Mario Garza of Symbolic Studies. It's going to be great. What's up, Brenda and Marin? Cool. Good to see everybody. All right. So just, before we get into the subject matter at hand, I want to kick it over to y'all and say hi and give you my heartfelt thanks for coming on and presenting information once again. Who knows how many times you've put some slides together and ladled the great gnosis for us, and we appreciate it. We love you. So how you guys doing?
Well, hello to Chance. Thank you for having us. And thanks for, as always, being so gracious as a host and to invite us on. And hello to everybody out there. Really excited to talk about this subject today. Dive into these golden waters because there's a lot to talk about, a lot to cover. And we're pumped to be here and to do it.
Yeah, definitely. So the fact that you're having us on to talk about this, I know it's obviously a taboo topic in some circles and everything else, but hopefully we'll enlighten people and maybe encourage people to give this a try for themselves. We're 6 months into our journey, and so we've just been wanting to share kind of where we're at with everybody and what we've learned and maybe take a symbolic approach to everything as well, which we think has been helpful.
Yeah, and actually what we're coming to realize too is there hasn't been a lot of talk about the symbolic side of Shivambu and urine therapy, which, I can see why, because as Mario said, it is a taboo subject, but there is so much deep symbolism, so much mythology, and so much history in this subject that it's hard to ignore once you see it and start tapping into it.
I agree.
Yeah. There's lots of stuff out there you could interpret as representing this thing that's so close to our everyday life. Proverbs 5:15, I put that in the episode description. Drink waters out of thine own cistern and running waters out of thine own well. Some the mainstream might take that interpretation or that verse as a reason to ridicule or whatever. But to me, I'm like, oh no, that sounds very like a direct instruction. I don't even know where you would apply that outside of, maybe a more absolutely literal sense that you drink water from the place that you're at. But the Bible's always got multiple layers of meaning to it. And that one I can't even see an astrotheology, astronomy meaning. It just seems like there's probably two meanings at max. But yeah, right. I'm excited for the symbolism side of this too. I think that's underrepresented. I'm looking forward to what kind of sparks might fire off in my mind as you guys start laying it out. I'll be trying to weave on the fly. But I've thought about this. I haven't embarked on the journey myself, but there's so much to it that actually makes sense in my, my real new healed worldview versus the old worldview that was sort of foisted upon me like everybody else's. And within that framework, I'm like, okay, why wouldn't this be yet another one of those opposite day things that what they told you was actually, opposite of what's true? Yeah.
100%. Yeah. Your body wants to heal itself. And the more we've thought about this modality of healing, it's just really blown our minds because it makes too much sense. And it makes sense with things that you're saying right now with what you just put out there. From the Bible, and I've seen other things too and read other things where I'm like, is this what they're talking about? Because I feel as though our bodies really are just designed to do this actually, and that it's something that we've lost. And so when you kind of have that mindset, it's really interesting when you dive into this sort of experience and doing this, because you realize how much conditioning you have kind of been, given over the years about what urine is and what it's supposed to do and how you're supposed to treat it and look at it and things like that. So it's really been a paradigm shift in a couple of different ways, I would say.
Yeah. I 100% agree. And the conditioning thing was the biggest realization. That first moment or that first decision to consume Shivambu, which is another word for urine. So we may call it Shivambu throughout the stream. So just a little side note for that. They're interchangeable terms. But that first moment of being like, oh my God, I'm going to do this. And to be honest, it feels that way every single time. I get a rush every single time, and it might sound wild, but there's just something so grounding about it, and something so mysterious, but at the same time, something so, familiar. And I think it's because of all these things that we are literally producing this. It is our blueprint. It is, when you start reading and researching this, it's essentially structured water. Urine is structured water, and it's your structured water. It's structured to you and by you and for you. And that has been one of the biggest mind blowers for me, because what it makes me realize and what it makes me really remember is that every single moment of every single day, I'm structuring my water that I'm going to consume. So then it puts you in more of a gratitude state. It keeps you in more of the present moment, even though sometimes we slip out of that, obviously. But when you really start to go into those meditative states and think about what you're doing, it's like, well, what kind of structured water do you want to have? Do you want to have negativity? Do you want to have ill thoughts? Or do you want to have positivity and good thoughts of the things that you're doing or forecasting for your future or whatever that is, or even in your present moment? So that's been something that's been really awesome to just really kind of tap into and realize that that's what's actually going on. And you're also having every single event, every single thought, every single thing that's ever happened to you since birth and while you were in your mother's womb is all in there still. And that's, to me, a really beautiful thing as well.
Right. Yeah, definitely. There's a huge self-acceptance component with all of this. I realized I feel like I'm closer to myself, and I feel like what it does is it does a number of things. Structured water is definitely, obviously, it's a really interesting big one, but it's like a multi-layered, multifaceted sort of thing, right? Mm-hmm. Like what's actually happening, in your body with your kidneys, how urine relates to your blood and everything else. But there is such a sacred aspect to this that it really feels ritualistic, in nature. And there's some quotes that we'll be going over that kind of alludes to this as well. Yeah. It's a very private sort of thing. It's a special sort of thing. I know we're talking about it online, but there is an element to it where it really is kind of meant to be kind of like held close to your chest, basically. There's a ritualistic element here. There's a spiritual dynamic that plays into this kind of practice, which I don't think we realized when we first began.
Like a lot of information initiates would be holding on to. It's not meant for the profane. They're not, you got to earn it, that kind of thing. What really tipped me over the edge of acceptance that, probably going to try this myself, but waiting to have this talk so that I could be as pumped about it as possible if I do it, was Jennifer and I, as we've announced, we're having a baby. And we were recently, a month ago, we were getting an anatomy scan, just checking out all of the stuff with the baby, seeing all the parts, and we got to see her face, and everything's looking great. She's got huge legs. She's very, very adorable. And while the lady was doing the scan, she goes, "Hey, I see her opening her mouth. She's drinking right now. She's drinking the amniotic fluid. She's drinking her own pee." And that was the light bulb moment. I was like, oh, well, when are you healthier than when you are a baby? When are you more just like regenerative and growth oriented and pure than when you're a baby? And the baby's doing that. the entire time that they're capable. So, most of the time that they're in the womb, as soon as they got a mouth to open, probably.
Exactly. No, that's an excellent point for sure. When Michelle told me that blew my mind. But go ahead.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up because that was a mind blower for me as well. And, we're like breathing it in. We're breathing this in and it's developing all of our organs, our lungs, our skin, our bones. And it's high in allotonin or allotone, which is found in the plant of comfrey, which is known to be like a profound skin healer. It develops your hair, it develops your nails, it keeps them strong. It's a wound healer. So when you really think about that too, it's like, wow, this is the fluid that you're in for 9 months. You have your mother's, for a while going on, but then you start to produce your own in the womb. And then in the last 2 months of pregnancy is when it's the strongest. So that's when, kind of like the process is being finished up. Like, let's make sure this is all developed correctly because we're going to be entering into the realm of the world. So it's very interesting to see what's going on with all of that. And to me, it's such a no-brainer when you learn stuff like that. And it becomes less of this grotesque thing, and then it becomes a beautiful thing. And I think that's like part of the mind shift with it too, because we've been conditioned to think it's a waste product. And if you research this on the internet and you find just kind of regular normie sites, that's exactly what you're going to hear. But it never really goes any further than that of like what else is in urine and what even is urine, which when you come down to it, it's actually filtered blood plasma. And so that in and of itself, too, is another thing that was a light bulb moment because what's really sought after? Plasma. People donate plasma. They're using it in all sorts of things. Urine is also, and plasma is used in pharmaceutical drugs, depending on what it is. It's used in beauty products, you name it. It's like they're using these things, and it's typically from animals. And so I just find all of these things to be really fascinating. And it has just been this nonstop place of fascination for me. And I feel such a calling to really just lean into it and to share it with people because I really do think that it is probably one of the most precious medicines for ourselves that we can have, and it's free. And so that is another reason why it's probably blacklisted, because obviously it's not, then we're not going to be dependent upon the system that they've put in place for us to think that is going to come in and actually heal us.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And urine itself, what we're finding out is there are so many different uses for it. So it doesn't just start and end here. It doesn't end here at all. Right. There's all these different uses around the home, and there's different alchemical, processes that involve urine. People have said that depending on sort of the ingredient list, but there's definitely information out there that says that urine is one of the ingredients of the Philosopher's Stone, or, this sort of elixir of life, And it makes me wonder if it's actually just a metaphor, if urine is actually just that in and of itself. And we'll get into some slides later on that maybe suggest that that is what it's referencing. And so, the uses for it are many. And so it's so interesting to me that we've been conditioned to think the exact opposite. Obviously, this all too well, man. But just like what you were saying too, it's something you produce. It's really beneficial to you. It's very versatile too. It seems like it really seeks it's a seeker, actually. It's a hunter. And it hunts for things that it can stabilize, it seems like, right?
Yeah, that's a good way of saying it.
And so it doesn't just help in one area physiologically, biologically. It seems like there's many different things that it can do for you and has helped people with. I have to give a shout out to Amanda Vollmer, because we saw her speak last year in person, and she did more of a Q&A presentation. And so she fielded a lot of people's questions about health and everything else. And so many times throughout her presentation, she mentioned two things over and over and over. One is that whatever your ailment is, whatever you're dealing with, there are solutions for you, and that there's a number of solutions. It's just about finding the one that works for you, basically, and what you're willing to try and things like that. but she sees so many people that basically have been told by the medical establishment that we don't know what's going on with you. You're a complete anomaly. We don't know how to fix you. We don't know what's going on. It's completely mysterious, your ailment. Sorry, you're going to have to go to this specialist and then that specialist and that specialist. And she sees a lot of these people and she reassures them that you're not an anomaly. We can figure it out. And there's a number of things we can do for you. And on top of saying that, she kept on referring to people to drink their urine. You know, if you haven't started drinking your urine, if you haven't incorporated urine therapy, then you're missing out on one of the most basic things that you can kind of do for yourself. And because of its hunting abilities, it might seek out and really assist with whatever it is you might be dealing with. So those were the two things that she mentioned over and over and over and over again. Drink your pee, and there are solutions out there. And this is perhaps one of the best sort of little known solutions there is for all sorts of different things. And we're just starting to scratch the surface because we're just 6 months into our journey. So again, just to kind of reiterate, we're almost just like catching people up to speed with where we're at. And we're not claiming to be the authority on anything because this is we know that this is a deep well and we've dove into it, you know, but there's further depths to kind of explore and things like that. There's a whole entire history here.
You know, and also it's kind of like a lifetime medicine too, just like, you know, just like it is, like we're talking about it being a part of your birth process, birth story. It's going to be there until the day you die, and it's a medicine from birth to death, and that's another thing that's really cool about it. And I guess one of the things I wanted to make sure too to say for people who are wanting to start out is to really like start slow. And topical use is a really good way to do that. You know, you can start applying it topically. I've found the topical use to be wonderful, actually, in combination with the oral use as well. But I've had so many profound moments or like thoughts about what's going on while I'm doing it. And that's been healing in and of itself. And if you are going to start on the journey, just kind of be ready for whatever, because things are going to come up and you're probably going to go through a detox moment, and you're probably going to go through multiple, because as Mario said, that hunting element of it, it's hunting through your life. So if you have even like physical injuries that have been, you know, with you for many years, there's a good chance that the Shivambu is going to search that out and start healing it. And that might come through in a lot of ways. I had, for the first time ever, I like broke out in some sort of rash on my legs, and it was kind of like eczema. It was like something between eczema and psoriasis. And I was kind of like, whoa, what is going on here? And what I noticed.
So you're saying drink your pee, you'll break out in rashes. It's great.
Yeah, just do it. And, you know, so now that I have the view that I have on ailments, I knew it was an opportunity, and I wasn't scared. And I was like, no, this is a good thing. Like, kind of like bring it on, and I'm going to do whatever I can to encourage it. And so by doing that, what I started to realize was it was pinging, like the rashes were showing up on areas where I had injuries, where I knew I had an injury, where I have scar tissue in a certain area of my leg. And then what ended up happening was a lot of the emotions and the memories of that injury when it happened were coming up. And then as soon as I processed that area of my leg started to heal. And I was also applying like aged urine nightly and wrapping my legs. It was a sight because I was coming to bed wrapped in like saran wrap with like, you know what I mean? I had my feet wrapped with bags over them, and I sound like a freaking, you know, bag lady from the grocery store or something. But I was like, no, I have to do this. And the more I did it, the more it was healing, the more things came up. And then it just was like, it started processing, it started clearing up, and then there it was. And that was one of the detox events I'd say that definitely came up. And both Mario and I kind of came down with like a flu, I would say, in the beginning of June. And I knew that was what was going on as well. And so if people want to also look into, her name is Megan McDonald. I interviewed her on the Healing Home twice. And she was the one that actually brought to our attention the whole hunter aspect, or the hunter archetype of urine. And when she said it, it just made so much sense. And she just talked about that. Once you start this journey, just know that this is kind of what you're signing up for, that there are going to be things that happen like that. And one of the other things we've really noticed too is like, even on an emotional, a psychological level, there's like these physical healing moments or detoxes that are coming up, and it translates over into your waking life. So it's like, even if there's other things that you haven't been dealing with that aren't physical ailments, if it's like a psychological emotional thing, those things are then coming up, and then you're kind of faced with that. So then you have that option. Okay, are you going to walk through this fire, or are you going to store it again in the body for the urine to then hunt it out again? So you're kind of faced with all these things, and that's been one of the most like beautiful parts of it, I would say, but most challenging as well. And as we get into some of the slides, I have some thoughts on like fear and the kidneys and the connection with Shivambu and why that's important to understand, because the kidneys are producing the actual medicine we need in order to conquer our fears. And that's been a big realization of mine just recently too, specifically even preparing this presentation. So again, thank you, Chance, for allowing us to come on, because there's just been even more revelations that have come just arranging this and coming, like just connecting more dots and stuff. So it's been really cool.
Yeah. Like the thing I was alluding to earlier about worldview, and the reason why I chose the ouroboros type symbol for the art for this episode, I actually went with the Neverending Story version because it's called the Auryn, which is like urine, you know. But the mainstream worldview, or the one that's offered to you when you're just going along to get along and following what everybody else says is true, is that we're in a universe of continuous decay and entropy, and that everything's just slowly dissipating into oblivion of slow heat death. And once you get out of that box and you realize, okay, the world, the universe is a cyclical, or like the ouroboros, snake eating its own tail. You know, look at the water cycle. It goes through this process of being in the air and then falling to the earth, and then going through the animal and plant life, and then going back up into the air, and it's always returning, always returning. And you look at the cosmos from our perspective, you see that the cycle of the circuit of planets and stars always returning to where it was. And you realize that like this whole thing is the snake eating its own tail, that life requires death for life to continue. And so you begin to look at the things that you might have considered to have been the decay or the decrepit with a different light, you know, like fertilizer for plants. And actually urine makes a great fertilizer. And I don't think that this argument is, you know, going to make people jump to like, okay, well, what about feces? Because I think that has a more obvious purpose than urine. It's not the same thing at all. But once you have this worldview of realizing that you are a self-generated, eternal, infinite being, then it makes a lot of sense that your own output would connect to your own input in that way. And that what you need, you already have within you. We all say that, but is it a lot of lip service, or is it like literally true? And there's lots of esoteric media out there, like, you know, the symbol of the Auryn in the Neverending Story, or one that I think is particularly potent is in Dune, for example, the freemen in Dune. They're the free men, right? And they're the most powerful warriors, unconquerable, resilient, living often with the land in the age of technological advancement, but they're still like with nature. And what do? They have these still suits that captures their own body's moisture and recycles it back to themselves all the time. Nobody complains about them drinking their own pee. They're like, yeah, Freeman, get it. Freeman crush. You know? And there's so much gravy in the Dune books. It's ridiculous about, you know, Frank Herbert either was very observant of the world, or like he, I don't know, was in some circles and knew some things. I'm not sure. But that detail you can't really ignore. So it comes down to the question of like whether or not you want to do it before you judge or cast like a ew gross at people that are telling you that it's working for them. To ask yourself, do I live in a universe where what comes from me is nothing but death and decay, and it has no has no higher purpose, or it has no alignment to my source? Or am I the source of my own regeneration? Am I containing this spark and seed of the infinite with an intelligence to my body that is beyond just my conscious ego, but that it knows what I need because it itself is a living being filled with the life force energy, indivisible from the rest of the life force energy of the cosmos? I mean, every tuning I do, I think part of what makes it effective is that I specifically invoke the intelligence of my body and the intelligence of the person who I'm working with, their body. And I ask, please just guide this process. Let the intelligence of our bodies be what directs us through this whole thing. They know, like, your body knows what you need and your energy is asking for. And my body is a vessel of that exact same cosmic life force. And that there's no separation between the two. So let that be the guide. So when you're talking about it being like a hunter, that makes a lot of sense to me. That makes perfect sense to the principle that I'm describing, that your body has an innate intelligence and actually knows everything there is to know in creation that's true. I'm not saying that your body knows like abstract human trivia, but stuff that's like foundational and actually true in nature, that has a physical existence and permanence. Your body is aware of all that. It's all linked up. It's all one big everything is everything situation. So on that note, like, it all makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, exactly, man. No, really well put. The thing that kind of was tripping me out is just thinking about how long mankind, how many generations of people came before me that, basically had all of this encoded in their bodies as well. Thinking about my ancestors and their kidneys and their urine and what they ate and what they did, and them, being with nature and everything else, and just kind of how, as humans or anything living, you're part of this unbroken chain that goes back who knows how long. It kind of just like to your point with the ouroboros, it's like probably like a Taurus field cyclical sort of thing. It's always been and always will be.
Yeah, no beginning. Existence exists. There's no such thing as non-existence. So how can there be a beginning to existence? Because before that would have had to be non-existence. And by the very nature of what non-existence is trying to describe, it doesn't exist. I know that's like just sort of philosophical rhetoric sounding, but like really think about that. There's no such thing.
It's completely legitimate. Yeah, for sure. And so, and then to see kind of how far back this practice goes, like when you read some of the Vedic texts and stuff like that, and how they make reference to it, and it's called Shivambu because of Shiva, right? And so to me that's really just completely mind-blowing, but it feels very primordial. It feels like a return to self. It feels like it I feel as though it's brought a centeredness to me, and sort of a balance that I maybe was looking for, or something along those lines. But I've integrated it into my morning practice, basically, of my morning routine, which I've kind of said for years that was the hardest thing for me to kind of initiate or get used to or really kind of figure out. And this just fits in there so perfectly that, just like what you were saying, I feel as though our ancestors were doing this, and that it's actually like a lost practice, and that we're supposed to be doing this. There's too many benefits to kind of ignore that way. One of the things that I think was one of the first sort of like aha moments that we didn't really anticipate with it, because I hadn't read anything about it, but intuitively, I wash my face with it in the morning, and I soak my beard with my urine in the morning. And it took a couple days for me to notice it, but on the second day, I was like, I smell great. I'm like, what's going on here? And it was this familiar smell. You said, I think the word familiar earlier. There is this familiarity with this smell that I'm like, this is crazy. And then on the third day, when I smelled it again, I told Michelle, I'm like, you got to smell my beard. Like, really get up there and take a nice whiff and see what's going on here. And she did, and she loved it. And it's literally your natural musk. And so it's amazing. You can't buy this. No. You can't find something synthetic that's like this. And so to me, that was an incredible revelation that this really, it spoke to me. It spoke to her. It feels right. It smells right. And so that's just one of like many different examples of like, wow, this is pretty nuts that this is actually the thing here. And so I don't know if
beard has been looking extra good the last 6 months.
Oh, like right on, man. Yeah, nice. I appreciate that. But do you have any commentary on that?
Yeah, because it was kind of the same thing. It was very shocking. When I smelled it, it was those pheromones went off. Like I was very attracted to it in a deep way. I'm already very attracted to Mario and all things Mario. But when I smelled his musk, it was like, oh my God. I mean, it felt like my primal instinct to be attracted to him was really like lightened up in me. And, it makes so much sense too when you think about how animals use their urine, to establish territory or to attract a mate or to show what phase of life they might be in, if they're fertile or if they're ready to have babies or what have you. And it's really interesting too that I find that even the topical use that I've been doing, I can smell my own scent on my body after it dries and stuff. But Mario's is much stronger, which I find interesting because I think that it also goes in line with the hunter aspect of it, and the man being the hunter, the man being the projector, the woman is the receiver. So I feel like a man having a stronger scent made a lot of sense to me. I don't know if that makes sense to all y'all, but to me it made a lot of sense. Obviously because we have different hormones and pheromones as well, but yeah, it's quite profound, and the skin healing properties of it are really deep. And I'll say too, the days when I use it topically, I don't need to use oil or moisturizer or anything. And your skin feels soft and it feels moisturized. It's protected. I'll like put it on before I go in the sun, and I feel like it protects my skin from the sun a little bit better. If you do get a sunburn, you can use it to help not blister or to just like reduce the pain and all of that stuff. So it kind of goes back to what we were talking about with being in mother's womb, of just being an exceptional skin, hair, nails, tendons, every structure in our body, it can heal. So yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Right. Yeah. Liquid gold, just like the comment. That's for sure it. And that's actually one of the first few slides that we have is talking about what's up, Slick. The golden aspect here and what else is related to gold, and including obviously the sun, gold itself, honey, things like that. We have a little list going. And so that's kind of another thing that I think is really fascinating is the fact that it's golden, it's yellow. And there are so many things out in nature that are really potent, really special things that are produced that are golden, And so to me, that's just like it's a very basic correspondence, but that in and of itself is worth discussing for sure.
Should I bring it up?
Yeah.
I think we've warmed everybody up nicely here.
Cool.
So.
One thing I will comment about is using it topically and like the whole musk thing that Mario must have going on. I can actually smell it through the screen, and I'm not attracted to it, but I get why you would be. But awesome. There's always kind of like that. There's that kind of trope stereotype of the kid in school that smelled like pee, or like the homeless person that has a strong smell of pee, and that's typically the first thing that's going to image into someone's mind if they're not already kind of opening up to thinking about this differently in the way you're talking about. And I wonder if, back to the whole programming it, structured water aspect of it, that, because both of those cases that I just named of the person who smells like pee in a bad way, they're not confident. They're like afraid of bullies, or They're in a sort of schizophrenic paranoia state they have no physical home. They're just not grounded, centered, confident. They're in a fear state. So their kidneys are probably not programming that urine with the intention of make me attractive, make me strong, make me healthy. They're not even doing it intentionally. It's actually a product, like the reason they smell like it is a product of their carelessness and their lack of attention to hygiene, or if it's the kid, not being cared for themselves. So, I think it's apples and oranges when we talk about those circumstances and like the gross factor of somebody smelling like urine versus what you're describing. I just wanted to point that out, that I could see how that's not the same thing at all as the way that you guys are using it. Or Braden is saying in the chat that he does rub it on his face in the morning sometimes, and he mentions urea is usually one of the first ingredients in fertilizer and beauty products. Good stuff. So yeah, I think that's important.
No, that's a really great point. That's why too the whole dynamic that I mentioned earlier about this self-acceptance dynamic with it is so profound. It's so interesting, because I'm just inclined to think once again that we are supposed to be doing this, that we're designed to do this the same way, we're designed to do all sorts of other things that are natural. And so your apprehension to doing it, or your acceptance of doing it, is going to say a lot about where you're at with your own personal self-acceptance. And this whole thing about obviously mankind being dirty and sinful and gross and, corrupted and distorted and everything else. This to me is kind of, at least for me personally, it's been one of these things where when I consume it and I kind of have a communion with it, I'm communing with myself, and so there is this sort of like self-love aspect to it that's really, really interesting. And I'll say, at least for me personally, I don't know if this is a universal sort of thing, but I really can kind of confidently say that my heart chakra has opened up since practicing Shivambu over the last 6 months. I feel it. I actually can feel I'm more emotional. I'm more willing to be emotional with Michelle and all of these things. And I'm willing to show my emotions more. It's caught me off guard a few times where, I used to watch, dude, the craziest stuff for many years, and nothing would shock me. Nothing was that jarring to my senses. I could watch any kind of video, and for a while, I think, or when I was younger, it was kind of like a source of pride or something, that like I was hardened. And now I realize that that's actually not a good thing. You were desensitized, so now when I see stuff, things that I've seen many times before, it gets me in a way that it did not used to get me before. And it's led me to even, literally like tear up in ways that I never used to beforehand, because I always used to just stuff it down and bottle it up. And so that's been a very interesting thing for me personally. And it lines up exactly with, once we started doing this, that is something that kind of came to the surface as well. And so for me, it almost feels like heart medicine, and I feel like I'm better.
That's consciousness, Mario. Consciousness is synonymous with feeling, and anything, if nothing else, the most basic evidence that you're having some sort of spiritual expansion or your consciousness is widening is that you're going to be more sensitive. You're going to feel things more powerfully. That's just basics. Like, if there's really no other metric than that to be accurately able to gauge if your consciousness is growing or shrinking.
Beautiful. Yeah. It definitely, that's been a thing over the last 6 months for sure. So it's been a beautiful sort of side effect or whatever you want to say, that I personally wasn't anticipating, but it makes perfect sense that it would be happening.
Cool. Yeah. That's a really great testimony.
For sure.
Okay. Whoops. Slide 1. Let's start here. You just tell me when to jump forward, Mario.
Right on. Yeah. So I thought it was really interesting that it's sometimes referred to, right, as Shivambu, Shivambu Kalpa Vidhi, the water of auspiciousness. Very, very interesting. I love just this whole rabbit hole of Shivambu and what it was referred to and how it was looked at in like these Hindu scriptures and things like that. But that's obviously just the intro slide if you want to move along here. I put a grail there because there's Holy Grail symbolism in the mix with all of this stuff too. The search for the Holy Grail, what the Holy Grail symbolically represents and everything else. But all things golden. So obviously the sun, you know, the golden sun, gold itself, right? Honey, right? And a lot of things related to the bees themselves, right? The flowers and the pollen. We just wanted to create a little list here of things that are golden. Butter and ghee, egg yolks, right? All of these beautiful, wonderful things. It's really interesting to me that the color gold is associated with our urine. And obviously, gold is like the king of precious metals. You know, the sun, arguably, I know Jupiter gets the king of the planets, but you can make the case that the sun is really the king of the planets too. You know, and so there's a lot of interesting things here going on with the color gold, literally just with color symbolism. But did you have anything to add? It's kind of obvious stuff, but
yeah, it's kind of the same thing. Just because we've been kind of thinking about this from the perspective of all these golden things are held in such high regard and they're so precious, and a lot of them are very nutrient dense, you know, like egg yolks. If you're going to eat eggs, you know, the yolk is going to have the most nutrients of the whole portion of it. And same thing, even just like I love the weave with the bees for multiple reasons, but pretty much everything bees produce is golden and it's yellow and it's so nutrient dense and rich and healing, and all the things up here too have such deep healing properties as well and have been held sacred throughout history in different ways. And that to me, I mean, I even think about oils, you know, oils that are golden. So, which we didn't list, but like lanolin is something, you know, that is derived from sheep. And then also you have like jojoba oil, which is a very sacred oil. It can be found in the Bible. And we've discussed that even on Astro Herbs, jojoba, and where it comes from and just like the history of that. So there's all sorts of things going on with that it is just really interesting, and thought we could bring it to the table. And of course, I'm sure there's more gold things and that could be added to the list, but this was our kind of just like starting off point.
What's interesting to think about, is there anything gold that's bad? Like off the top of my head, that's natural, I should say. I'm sure there's plenty of artificially gold or yellow things that maybe aren't so good, but in nature, I am stretching to think of anything that's negative that would be in that color range, honestly.
Yeah, no, I feel you. What you could perhaps say, you know, is that the light itself, it's obviously the symbolism as it relates to light and the rays of the sun and everything else, pretty obvious. The light can be blinding as well, you know, and the light can also be a veil itself. I actually just got into this when decoding the Empress card for Patreon, is that she's veiled in light. There's different myths where the woman is veiled in light, she's robed in light, or she's dressed in light. And so the light can actually be a veil to other things as well. So there can be more than meets the eye, literally. And so if anything, that's what I can think of. Or even too, we know that the New Age community, depending on the circles you hang out in, isn't all that it's cracked up to be, but they put this sort of love and light kind of veil to everything, and it's not actually that. So there could be an illusory aspect to light and to things that are kind of golden as well, just like anything else, basically. But that's all I can think of.
Well, and I think of even like gold. When you think of gold, it's like there can also be greed that comes with this. You know, you're just chasing that gold, chasing the whatever you want to say, the coins, the chains, the this and that, and it can be taken to a dark place. So just like with everything, there is that light and dark aspect. So that's a great point.
Right. Yeah. So I actually just did a podcast a week or two ago about gold. I was invited to talk about gold. And so we really got into gold symbolism, and it's interesting that we're talking about this. It's also interesting that we're in Leo season right now too, which is ruled by the sun. And so I thought the timing with that was pretty perfect. But it's fascinating. I know I've brought this up on InnerVerse before, but there's a few of my symbolic research books that basically relate gold to feces, and that sometimes gold nuggets was referred to as the feces or the excrement of the sun god. And that's pretty interesting, like symbolically, metaphorically, that makes a lot of sense. A couple of my books make reference that dowsers have picked up a similar energy or essence from both gold and excrement, which I thought was really interesting too. I haven't followed up with that to see, I don't know, just to seek out more information about what that's all about. But I thought that was pretty intriguing. The other thing I'll mention about gold that I just recently learned that I think is fascinating. This comes from Rene Guénon, who I've been going on about for like the last like half a year or so because I'm diving through all of his books. But he says during the Golden Age, that gold actually was viewed very differently amongst the people, including people that might be higher up the ladder socially. And that gold was viewed as literally mineral light. At least in India, it was viewed as mineral light. But to get gold and hoard it for yourself, for your own possession, was like taking away someone's sunlight, basically. And the belief was that gold could not actually literally be owned. And so Rene Guénon, at least according to him and his research, he says that gold only became a personal possession as man has fallen and as man has become less spiritual and less centered and less balanced, basically. But that gold originally was viewed as something that literally cannot be owned. But then slowly but surely during these ages, if you're to believe that we live in a darker age or something along those lines, that's when people started hoarding gold for themselves. I thought that was pretty interesting.
One thing about the gold is the association with the solar plexus chakra and how that, there's a lot of organs that are actually going to be involved with the solar plexus. But the kidneys are a main one.
Right.
So it's, and even like the liver is in there, and sometimes the bile of the liver can kind of have like a yellowish tint to it. I find that all pretty interesting, but I wanted to talk about the solar serpent symbolism for a moment too, in terms of the gold aspect of it. And well, what I find interesting is how like where your urine comes out is the phallus for a male, right? Which would be important to the symbolism of whoever was coming up with all this crazy synchro-mystic, linguistic, reflectivity, holographic nature of our language. Probably be often male priests, you'd think, but who knows? And so the phallus is kind of like the serpent on the body. And there's a lot of words that correlate between the idea of an eye and a serpent. So even like your phallus has an eye on it. They call it that, right? But in Hebrew, the word nakash, which is either a word that can mean a serpent or a shining one. It's the word they use to refer to the brazen serpent of Moses that heals people that look upon it. That word actually also signifies to look at something attentively or like observe something, to perceive augury or omens. So there's a word that correlates serpent and eye. Then you have the word ophis in Greek, which is serpent, and that is very close to the word ops, which is the eye in ancient Greek, almost the same word. And fascinatingly enough, to your golden age, the Romans actually believed that the consort of Saturn during the golden age was a goddess that they called Ops, and that she was like an abundance fertility goddess from that age. The sun, anyway, back to the eye thing, the sun is obviously a big eye in the sky. And without it, your eyes are essentially useless. And there's lots of stuff I could wax on about with the symbolism of snakes and the sun. And I'll just hold off on that because I'm going to get into that in an upcoming podcast with Dylan on our Inner World show. But just wanted to point out some of that as well, that like the serpent, the eye, the sun, and that the place where this gold is coming from kind of, and even like the female vagina is like very related to eye symbolism, like shape wise.
No, that's great, man. Exactly. There's so much symbolism too with the sun as it relates to the pole as well, because it's a symbolic pole that things revolve around, even if you're talking about like a central sun or a spiritual sun, sometimes referred to as like a black sun. So there's a reason why in the Rider-Waite card of the Fool that his pole is pointing directly at the sun, because there's this old polar solar dynamic kind of going on there, and the pole just looks like an eye. So I see that sort of connection as well. But
and the letter I looks like a pole.
Right, yeah, exactly, yeah, for sure. Nice, good
Cool.
stuff, man.
All right,
Awesome.
some anatomy.
Yeah, so the kidneys are on display here, and I'll hand this off to Michelle.
Yeah, so I mean, as most people know, the kidneys is where our urine is basically generated and where it's filtered, and that's been kind of one of my areas of interest for multiple reasons, but kind of like thinking about the importance of every organ. But when I think about the fact that the kidneys are like the factory of this golden elixir for ourselves, it kind of like really puts into perspective how important they really are, which I think is kind of funny. And one of the thoughts I had was how they always say in like allopathy, oh, you can live with just one. And it's like, yeah, you probably can, but how effective is that? Or what does that do to your entire system or the entire code of what's going on in your body? So just something interesting to kind of think about. But as I always go to is like in traditional Chinese medicine, as a lot of people know, and I know you know this, Chance, too, but kidneys connected to fear. And as you talked about the solar plexus. So everyone who knows what it feels like to be fearful, you feel that in the solar plexus area of your body. And so I find it interesting, as I said in the beginning of the show, that the kidneys are associated with fear, but they are the actual thing that produces the medicine you need to conquer those fears, or to understand the fears, or to tap into those fears that you're having so that you can transmute it. And so this kind of goes back to the age-old practice of homeopathy, which is treating like with like. And I remember when we did our first episode on urine therapy a couple months ago or something, it was Topher Gardner that he put a comment underneath the video talking about like basically urine therapy is basically the beginning of homeopathy. It's kind of like the first homeopathy practice that could be even practice is urine therapy, because you're taking in those things that are inside of you and you're treating it with that same thing. And so for me, that's been one of the things that I've been really holding dearly, is that whole fear aspect going on. And one of the things that I've been learning too is that when you are practicing urine therapy and you're consuming it on a daily basis, your kidneys actually are stimulated to work more quickly, which is really, really interesting to me, because your body then is being signaled like, oh, okay, we need to produce more of this because we're getting to work here. We're getting to the deep work that's needed here, and the body is almost like craving it in some way. And the other thing that will happen too, and I did have this experience myself, of if you fast while you are consuming your urine, so doing like a water and urine looping fast, you will find yourself peeing a lot more often. And that can happen if you're fasting and you're just consuming water. But it's like there's this different thing that happens. Like you could find yourself peeing almost like every 15 minutes, depending on how long you're fasting, how much you're consuming, how much water you're consuming. So it really is also a testament to the kidneys clearing things out, and the more you consume, the more it's clearing. So all of these things together is really fascinating to me. And then even if you aren't fasting and you're just having a normal day and you're consuming water and hopefully healthy beverages throughout the day, you're producing urine quite a bit. So to me, that's a signal of your body almost telling you of there's an abundance of this for a reason. and it's useful, and there are multiple uses for it. And Mario mentioned it around the home, but like people use it to clean laundry. That's something like even in Roman times that I learned that they would collect the urine of the community and they would use it for laundry. Or you can like wash your windows with it. People say it's like a phenomenal window cleaner. There's all these different uses for it. You can cleanse your hair with it. I know it was a tradition in like Eskimo time, well, not Eskimo times, but with Eskimo women specifically, that they would cleanse their hair with the urine because it is such a deep cleanser, and it has all the benefits as well. So the whole thing with the kidneys has been really fascinating, and that's where my mind goes to it right away, with the fear and that it producing the actual thing that you need to conquer your fears.
One thing that's cool is on the language side, I've never looked it up before, but I just did. And our word urine is an ancient word. It is not changed since the furthest back that we have records of the Greek language. So it was still oron back then. It's basically the exact same word. And when you break that apart, you get or, which is gold, and on, which is the sun. And then as a verb, it's oreo, which would be like or, gold, rio, river, golden river. And river symbolism and sun symbolism still very, very correlate. So I think that's pretty interesting that in so many ways we think we're advanced because we have separated ourselves from nature, and we have like this chemical detergent now to wash our skin and wash our clothes. And we don't use the cleaning power of the river or the rain. We don't use the clothesline and the sun to dry out our clothes. Like, think how like that has an effect of cleaning the clothing just itself. So one of the things about sunlight is that it's like purifying, it actually can get stains out of clothing, believe it or not. Most of us have no experience with that, but that's a fact. And there's like, back to the serpent symbolism with the sun too, salve, serp, those are etymologically the same root, and which is just a very slight letter swap that is quite permissible in etymology. That the idea of a salve or salvation and a serpent, same thing. So the sun is healing, it's helios. And so these words for urine, our word for urine, referring to the river of gold of the sun, essentially. And this ability that you're saying that it has to like hunt things out and clean things out in your body, that makes so much sense, because that's literally what the sun does, is it purifies and cures and heals things and cleans things that are left out in it. I mean, leave a corpse out in the sun and it'll just be like bones, clean. I mean, other things are at play there too, but yeah, the sun bleaches things, cleans things. That's so cool how all of that fits together.
Yeah, dude, I love that. That's fantastic. What I thought of with urine as well is I'm always now tracking words that have in within it and just contemplating what does that represent. You're in. And then also you are, I'm a nut for you are words. I always keep an eye for those words too. Goes way back and oftentimes means like original, primordial, origin, something along those lines. There's a huge northern connection with as well, right? Ursa major, minor, things like that. And so so that to me is pretty interesting as well. I think about modern plumbing now, and I think about how we put it into the bowl, and then with one button push or whatever, it's now sent away, and we don't have to think about it or deal with it. And we look at it as a convenience, but at what expense? Is it really a convenience? Is it designed, for us or against us? And I'll just briefly mention the fact that Tracy Twyman's last book, Genuflect, which was a novel, one of the whole entire things behind it was this building in London that collected everybody's urine, and that there was a whole occult secret society that was collecting everybody's bodily fluids for different sort of rituals and things like that. And she gets heavy into it. And so to me, it's just one of those things too. I'm like, is there something to that? What's going on there with that, right? And so anyway, so that's that's besides the point, I guess. But
It totally goes along with it.
yeah, it's a heavy
Sounds
book. I
about
don't.
right.
Yeah. So anyway, so there you go.
All right, you're in blood connection.
Yeah, this is a good one. I think it was like a week or so ago, we had a pretty nice conversation about this together of the correlation with the blood and the urine and how closely related they actually are. And as I mentioned too, of just the urine being filtered blood plasma, and that's what's going on. And so, there's a couple, I think, do we have a quote? I think we have a quote on the next one. Yep. Urine is simply a healthy liquid which is filtered out of the bloodstream. What at one moment was part of the blood can be found in the urine a split second later. And so this kind of also goes into the whole awareness of what you're putting into your body. And that's been one of the more profound things for, I know, both of us, because whatever you put in is going back in, and there's certain foods that are going to come through strong flavor wise, particularly like salty foods, sour pungent foods, spicy foods. I've noticed that like things like soy sauce and stuff really come through like very umami. So it's like, it's a reminder when you're doing this that, at least for me, a lot of times, and yes, there's time for indulgence and there's time to treat yourself, but pretty much always now before I'm eating something, I will have that moment of going like, how is this going to taste, or how is this going to affect me when I consume it again? And so a lot of the stuff you'll learn about urine therapy, a lot of the people that are into it are very staunch, like vegans, or they're very staunch with no salt diets and things like that, which, that's a personal preference. I don't think that you have to follow that diet for this to be beneficial for you. But what I do think is that you should be aware, and hopefully you're already having a healthy lifestyle or having a healthy diet, so that you're not going to have to really think too much about those things when it comes to this. So, the blood, just having, it's like our life force. It's our oil, and it's the urine is just one step removed. And I know Mario had some thoughts about just like even just the color of the urine and the flavor of it. And then when you think about blood tastes kind of like salty. It's like got that irony sort of mineral rich flavor to it. That most people know what that tastes like. If you've bitten your lip or you have a cut and you put your finger in your mouth, you feel, you taste that almost like a mineral rich flavor of and the saltiness. And that kind of is the same thing when you're dealing with the urine as well.
Right. Yeah. So to me, it's really interesting. At least one night I was going down this weave in my mind of, is there something to be said about consuming blood and vampirism, and perhaps that in a way it's like we're consuming an aspect of our own blood. And then just thinking about the color spectrum as well, right? So red being at the very bottom, infrared being below that, violet being at the top, ultraviolet being above that. And so literally diluted blood plasma, filtered blood plasma, right? And just going down the scale from yellow or gold, you have red. And so even just the fact that it's a warmer color, our urine, is interesting as it relates to blood. And then it kind of got me thinking too, if actually like urination, obviously we think of women as the sex that bleeds, right? From between their legs and everything else, their cycle. But it got me thinking one night, I'm like, is urination like an aspect to actually like bleeding? What's the correspondence there? What's the relationship there? And then as it relates to the Holy Grail, one of the things with the Holy Grail, depending on sort of the myth you follow, the path you follow with that, the Holy Grail is the grail that collected the blood of Christ when he was on the cross, right? And so to me, that's interesting as well, right? Because we have wine now. People symbolize the blood of Christ with wine. And so there's this whole entire thing that, it like pervades like mythology and things like that with like humans consuming blood, and is sort of the actual metaphor that's actually beneficial and helpful is that we're actually talking about urine. In some way, shape, or form. This isn't something that I'm like diehard about, by the way. It's more, this is just me speculating and kind of just brainstorming here, I suppose. But there's too many connections with urine and blood, and then now drinking your urine and Shivambu and everything else. I can't not think about the potential connections with you are actually consuming, in a way, like an aspect of your own blood, you know, and then the whole entire you know, stem cells and everything else, and how stem cells are acquired. And, you know, I don't know, there's something here that I'm still chewing on, that I'm kind of still pulling at, but I see that there's overlap between these things, in my opinion. And also the Holy Grail too, ultimately what I really think, and I think this with a lot of what are they called, you know, artifacts or relics, right? People looking for these different ancient relics, like you know, you would see in Indiana Jones or whatever, the Nazis looking for the Spear of Destiny or the Holy Grail or whatever. I see a lot of these things, the Philosopher's Stone or what have you. There's so many variations on this myth, but I see that personally, a lot of these myths are symbolically alluding to the center of all that is, you know, the center that permeates everything, the center from which everything emanates and also returns to. You mentioned earlier, like, you know, everything kind of being everywhere at the same time or something along those lines. It's like, that's how I see the center. It's like the center is everywhere. It permeates everything. And so it's all an aspect of it. It's kind of like this fractal sort of thing, or whatever you want to say, but that the Holy Grail exists at the symbolic center of all that is. But the Holy Grail is also at the center of yourself, right? It's kind of like finding your true essence or your true core, something along these lines. And your heart chakra is your middle chakra. You know, your heart is one of your symbolic centers in your body. And so once again, coming back to blood and things like that. So I don't know. This is something that I'm still kind of toying with and playing around with in my mind. But I see that it's probably going to lead to perhaps more connections or something like that. This idea that we're consuming, you know, diluted blood plasma. I mean, there's no way around that. That's what you're actually doing. Yeah. And so is, you know, are we part vampiric, but in a positive way? I don't know.
Right.
Great comment here from Booty Yoga. Shivambu sounds like Syvayambu, the first man becoming itself. Svayam means self. Another thing too that I just thought about in regards to like bodily fluids, that if it's somebody else's, maybe it's gross, but if it's yours, you're like, maybe it's good. Obviously, you like your own blood. You want your own blood. And in this conversation, we're finding out that maybe your own urine is good for you specifically. But what about saliva? Saliva has that same root with like salve to it. We just had on this guy, the dental shaman.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I was asking him about like how to heal your gums and your teeth and remineralize your teeth, right? Well, he suggested that you would try sucking on cloves. And the reason for that is the clove itself has a medicinal benefit to it, but that it causes you to salivate profusely. And you just hold the saliva in your mouth and swish it and hold it in your mouth for a while. And I've been doing that, and your mouth feels great. Like it's like amazing after you've done that. And the saliva has all these minerals in it that your gums and your teeth can absorb if you're holding the saliva in your mouth. And just yet another thing, culturally speaking, it's like, ew, gross. Spit is gross. Saliva is bad. But one of the ancient like poetic things that honey was called is the saliva of the stars. So back to something gold into this weave. And the word in ancient Greek for saliva is cielos, which is like, if you just swap the H and the S, it's basically Helios. It's almost the exact same word. It's got that same root as salve. It's got the same root as the sol in salt. And of course, salt is the, you know, word for mineralization of all that. So, you know, this once you open to this perspective, you're like, it's not just the urine. It's definitely saliva has benefit too. I mean, how many plants are going to work as a poultice just by you adding like some of your own spit to it, moistening it, and then slapping it on your skin? Our friend Kyle, he showed me a video of his little boy Davide grabbing some plantain out of the yard and chewing it up and putting it on his boo-boos. And I was like, that kid is going to just be such a legend by the time he's an adult. Holy crap. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there. And just also thought Mario might have heard that honey is called the saliva of the stars before.
I've never heard that, but that's brilliant. I love that. That's awesome.
I do like the thought of the saliva though being beneficial, and it's beneficial even on so many levels, like just the lubrication of it. And if you don't have saliva, how torturous that can be, with dry mouth or your sore a throat issue or what have you. It's like that can be a slice of hell, actually, depending on the situation. And speaking of swishing, that's another benefit with the urine that I've been doing, is that it's can be used for oral health as well. And what I really noticed too, when in my morning ritual, is swishing the urine and then noticing over the course of after doing it for about a week or two, noticing that some of the teeth that I have like some sensitivity to, it was starting to diminish. And that was kind of a testament to this whole thing with the stem cells coming through and these proteins and the healing ability of the stem cells and what that's actually doing. So I now want to start with the clove thing and just like double it up, because for me, that's pretty interesting. I've never heard about the saliva with the minerals like that. So that's cool.
Oh yeah. And just look at clove buds. It's like a little tooth with a root coming out. The doctrine of signatures is right there with clove and teeth. Everybody go to Typical Herbs. Get yourself a little packet of organic clove. Use InnerVerse as your coupon code, and you'll probably check out with like about $1 order. So you need to buy something else because the clove is inexpensive. But there's a lot of good tinctures up in there. Get yourself some. Yeah, okay. So you have this next slide here about the Golden Fountain. This is a book or an audio book that maybe we would want to check out if we wanted more of the nitty gritty here.
Yeah, definitely. So Michelle's read this one from cover to cover. I haven't read it, so maybe you should take the mic and you can talk about it.
Oh, sure. Well, this is actually the updated cover. So this book has been around for quite some time. I can't remember exactly the year that it was originated. I want to say, I don't even know. Mario can look and
for people just listening, though, like on the playback, it's The Golden Fountain by Cohen van der Kroon. Cohen, so he's a priest.
Ah, well, that's actually another one of the things that I kind of like taps into with the new agey wave that I've noticed about the urine therapy arena. That it can be very new agey, which can be a turnoff depending on how you look at that. And I guess like one of my goals with urine therapy is to kind of bring like the groundedness to it and show people and help guide people of like, it's more grounded than what it might come across, depending on the avenue that you're traveling. But nonetheless, I would say if you want to get started with urine therapy, that this book is pretty freaking amazing. And every single section I read, I like highlighted, because it was just like, wow, it is full of gold. Kind of no pun intended. When it comes to this subject, there's testimonials from people that used it for chronic illness. AIDS is a really big thing. Like, it's been useful for the treatment of that, regardless of what you think AIDS is or isn't. It is definitely within that community. Urine therapy is highly regarded. Same thing with like cancer treatment and things like this. But yeah, I recommend this book big time, and you can get it on Amazon. That's where I got it, but it's wonderful. It's really well written and it's easy to read. And I read it within like 2 or 3 days. It was very captivating to me. So definitely get your hands on that if you're interested in learning more. And there's other books out there. And also another shout out to Amanda Vollmer. I know she is in the process of writing a book on urine therapy, and I am very excited once that comes out, because I'm sure she's going to have some really great things that she's gathered and is going to bring to the table with this subject for sure.
And we have quotes from this book too. Yeah. So to give people kind of a taste of what's inside of it. But here you go. I'll just read this guy. Urine is a crystalline-like substance containing high amounts of structured water. Very basic, but you mentioned that, and that seemed to really pique your interest when you heard it.
Yeah, and the other thing about it too is it kind of goes back to the salt thing that you were talking about, Chance. There is a salt aspect to urine, and just like with our kitty cats, sometimes, and I know you know this well, but like one of the warning signs that something's going on is that if there's crystals in their urine. So these are like salts that are coming to the surface. There's like actual, pieces of some kind of crystalline structure that is coming out to the surface. So it's like a silty sort of thing, but salt is a big deal with the urine. And I just find this crystalline substance thing and the structured water to be a really interesting weave, and the vibrational state of that and the ability of it to hold on to vibrations and thoughts and memories and you name it. So I know that I really am interested to hear what you have to say about that, Chance, too.
Also, I'm just thinking out loud, but I'm totally spacing her name, but the woman who does like the macro or photos of the
Veda.
Dude, I wonder if she would ever do urine.
Oh, maybe she already has. I would love to talk to her again. That'd be cool. Maybe we can set that up. All right. Keep that in mind.
Yeah, just curious what she would find.
Yeah.
Well, the crystal aspect of this is pretty interesting because really, like, what is a crystal? It's something that has a coherent molecular structure. By coherent, I mean like a geometric pattern that repeats. And that's a basic tenet or aspect of harmony. And it's an expression of the ordering principle that the universe is built out of. So it's, basically speaking, dissonant patterns, non-coherent patterns, non-symmetrical patterns, or they're not patterns. They're the opposite of pattern. What are they? You were talking about Jupiter being the king of the gods, and actually, or the king of the planets, but actually the sun is kind of the king of the planets. Well, the name Jupiter doesn't have to just apply to the luminary we call Jupiter. That name is derived from Yod-He Vav-He, which transliterates as I-E-U-E or J-E-U-E, you or Jew, and then Pater just means father. So it's quite apparent that Yahweh has a correlation to the sun when you dig into that, right? And so you Pater the sun, and that Pater word is the same root as where we're getting the idea of pattern. So the sun is the thing that's sending out the codes of light and information that allow for the coherence and the patterning of nature and that ordering principle to take effect in the first place. We know that you put things in moonlight, they decay faster. Things in sunlight purify faster. So there's definitely a there. Now, back to the crystal aspect, crystals are a pattern. They're not dissonant. They're consistent, which means the same reason that having nice crystals around in your space, like I've always got everywhere, they bring a coherent energy to the space. It feels better to be in the space where they're at. You feel a little more sharp. It's part of the same reason why, like, you can think more clearly in a clean room than in a messy one. Sure. So if that's, the water in our whole body, blood, all the liquid, plasma, it's very crystalline in nature. Even though it's not a solid, it's a liquid crystal. They have that in, how do you think you get those nice sharp images on your screens? It's a LCD display, liquid crystal. That's very important. So just the fact that your urine has these crystals in it or is a crystal structure would tell me, like, okay, well, that's not something that's representing decay or gross or death or bad. That's something that would invoke and invite the ordering and harmonic principle, the syntropic force. So good, life-affirming, growth-oriented, solar, and it's gold. That makes a lot of sense.
Right. Yeah, well put, man.
Very well put.
And poop is not like that. Poop is not a crystal. So like we're not, don't get carried away here and think that like drinking one means eating the other is good. We're not saying that.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. Definitely not saying that.
Let's not get carried away. Okay, I'm going to come up with the next slide. Yeah, but that's a cool thing. I never thought about the crystal thing with the urine before, but that's just another huge point, slam dunk point in the whole worldview aspect. Like, what's your worldview? Do you think, like, do you like crystals? Well, your urine is crystal. Do you think that the crystals in your home help you with something, or the one you wear or carry around? Well, there's a point for why maybe drinking some crystal that's charged up with your energy would be good for you. Makes so much sense.
Yeah, no, exactly. I agree. Excellent. Right on. So we wanted to include an image of Shiva because of Shivambu, and then we actually have some quotes that are attributed to Shiva. And in the Golden Fountain book, one of the cool things that Michelle showed me is that he actually has select quotations basically from various Vedic scripts about Shivambu and the practice and how they saw it in the ancient world, which just gives so much context to so many things. And some of the things that Michelle had mentioned that she read in here really were pretty fascinating. And so I think we have those after this image here. So yeah, so Shiva speaking to his wife. The Shivambu is to be drunk from pots made of gold, silver, copper, brass, iron, tin, glass, earth, bamboo, bone, leather, or bowl made of plantain leaves. Earthen pots are best. So literally just having this kind of concept that it shouldn't just be put into anything. You shouldn't, because I think we even saw people using plastic or something like that, but there's a whole tradition here of that's not what you want to do. You want to actually source your vessel. Basically the vessel is important. And so one of the things I'll say is that from when we began to now, I'm realizing how much nuance there is with this practice. At first, I just assumed just drink your pee and then that's it, and it's great. Drink your first urine of the day. But the more and more we learn, the more I'm realizing that there's actually there's sort of guidelines here. You shouldn't just drink. As an example, we'll come across a quote here in a second. Like even the first portion of your morning stream.
First and last.
Yeah, exactly, the first and the last. That you shouldn't. You should drink it midstream, basically. So there's lots of little things that we're kind of coming across now that are seeming to be pretty helpful and pretty interesting. And I'm not surprised that there is nuance here, and that it's not just you want to just consume it all. And even at the very beginning, I'll say as kind of like I don't know, just a warning for people perhaps who are getting into it. One of my things, this is common for people who overconsume, is actually having like a diarrhea sort of effect with it because you're consuming too much. This can either be like a detoxing sort of thing, and that's necessary, and you need to go through that. As Michelle mentioned, that there are going to be detox effects that people are going to experience. In my case, I think I realized that I was consuming too much. I was a little overambitious with it, right? And so
It's like our friend Kyle says, more is with medicine. More does not mean better, especially on like the homeopathy side of this too.
Right.
Like how much of this is about the feedback of information that your body's getting rather than some physical substance or nutrient.
Exactly right, 100%. So that's something that I went through, and it was so immediate too. It was very obvious what was going on. I was like, oh, okay, well, there's no other reason why this is going on. And sure enough, once I kind of scaled it back a bit, that stopped happening.
Yeah.
That's good detail to know.
Yeah, that was interesting to see. And then one of the other things too, the reason behind the just taking the midstream is that first burst could be clearing something out, that might not be as beneficial. And then the same thing with the end is like that's where sediments or things like that could come if it's like at the end, if you're the end of emptying your bladder. One of the other tips too, I'll say for people, and what I've begun to do is the cool thing about urine is that the longer it sits, once you age it, or even if it sits for an hour, it becomes more alkaline. And so one of my practices has now become, waking up earlier in the morning and then relieving myself, I have a special place where I like to set the Shivambu covered, and I allow it to sit for an hour or two, and then I consume it. And I found that for me personally, it felt more pleasant, and I enjoyed the more alkaline version of it. And so there are benefits to that. And there's also people who are very adamant about actually testing the urine as well with like pH strips and stuff like that. So just another tip for people out there who are curious about it or might want to begin.
Right, right. Also, just because she mentioned the aged urine, I think it's really interesting that there are people who use it to prevent like anxiety attacks or to reduce their anxiety sort of symptoms. And so we have a friend who was aging her urine, and she had heard that that is something you can use to calm yourself down. And she says it worked beautifully the times that she's actually given it a shot. And so it's just kind of amazing to me still. Once again, it's just like how many different uses are there? It's like it's kind of endless.
Great.
Yeah.
Oh man, I can't believe that I'm convinced to do this now.
Dude, if you do it, I'll be very curious to see if you stick with it, and then also obviously any of your thoughts kind of moving forward, because
I'll be like everybody else, gotta evangelize it once I start.
right.
I'm not saying you guys are like that. This is fascinating. Right. I mean, part of what's got me tipped over the edge is because obviously you two and I were great friends. We've got a excellent rapport and trust with each other. So hearing it from you is a lot different than hearing it from just like a random other person I interview or someone in an online chat somewhere. But also that you guys have created such a curiosity in me through the angle that you're approaching this and the way that you're thinking about it in the symbolic side. And like, you know, we're about to get into more from, I don't know which scripture this is, but
The Dhamma Tantra.
Yeah, it's at the bottom of the slides, or at least on a couple of them.
Yeah.
Dhamma Tantra. Yeah. And, you know, that's fascinating. The symbolic level of this is fascinating. And the more I think about it and the more we reflect together about it, the more I'm just like, this aligns with how I understand the world and life to function. It just does. I can't ignore that. So, then you guys are having such a grand old time over there drinking tea. I mean, all right.
For sure.
Crazy, man. It is.
Yeah, it is.
Crazy,
it's funny.
but not. I mean, it's just like it's one of those things where I don't know. When I first heard about it too, again, shout out Amanda Vollmer, I remember thinking like, wow, that's kind of wild. And then, but in the back of my mind, kind of like what you have said, Chance, always knowing that I was going to do it at some point, or always knowing that I would get to the point where I would try it, or it made sense to me or whatever. But in that moment, couldn't see myself doing it, but was like, nah, this will come. And just like with anything, you know, when the student is ready, the teacher appears sort of thing is what it's felt like a lot with this.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And she like saves her daughters. Like she has aged urine for her daughter for emergency purposes. And she goes through the different things on why you would want to have your own aged urine around for emergency purposes. It's really fascinating. I can't wait for her book to come out. I'll probably read that one actually.
Yeah, it's going to be a really good one.
So Shiva, continuing to speak to his wife here, he basically says that this is meant to be a secret. So, oh, my beloved Pavarti, I have narrated the details of Shivambu Kalpa. This is its technique. Attempts should be made to keep it a secret. Do not tell anyone. And I'll say that this is a very intriguing aspect to everything, in that I didn't realize, once again at the beginning, this is a whole journey for us, that this is basically a private sort of ordeal. In a way, you have to think about it as this is a bathroom activity. So this isn't something, as an example, you know, I don't know if there's people who publicly consume their urine online and have done so in podcasts and in shows and things like that. And I'm not so sure it's something that should be used like that. I think that it's actually more of a sacred, spiritual, private sort of affair, you know, personally. And so it's not like a beer or something and you're cheersing out and, you know, at the pub or something like that. And so I think it's intended to be a little bit different. It's such a private, personal thing. the word communion just comes to mind over and over, and the fact that it comes from within, and you're going through this sort of looping thing. I think that everything to me says that this is very much like an esoteric, personal sort of affair. And so when I heard that, when Michelle read that to me, I was like, that makes all the sense in the world. I feel like intuitively I kind of had an understanding of that, but to hear it from Shiva, to me was very, very interesting, and kind of lines up, I think, with a lot of the things that the symbolism kind of suggests as well. There is a sort of a secretive sort of thing. He mentions the word secret there, right? Not that, just like what you were saying earlier, some information isn't literally meant for everybody. The occult world exists for a reason, and I'm kind of like frequently reminded of that. It's occulted for a reason, a lot of this information.
Oh, back to the eye thing, occult and oculus, similar words, but I have to point out, is the reason why secret sounds like secrete because of this knowledge? Like it's your own secretions.
Wow.
Keep secret your secretions.
Yeah, man. That's a great point.
Before we get into this next part, I want to, just while we have a nice group of people here and we're all engaged, I want to take a moment, switch gears for just a sec, and show you guys some improvements I made on my website and give a little tuning story, very short tuning testimonial, because I want you guys to know about this. First of all, my website, InnerVersePodcast.com, done some facelifting on it. It's going to be a lot more enjoyable to use. If you go up to the Get Tuned page right here, the biggest upgrade is that you can now book a session through the website. So you no longer have to do the sending me money on PayPal or Cash App. You can still do that, but now you can go directly through the site and purchase. And I think that's just a more enjoyable experience for everybody, shorter, easier. I've put in some new options too, like getting $100 off if you book 3 sessions. That's great. And what's exciting about this page is you have information on this page. It's not just a place to go book, but if you want to just come and find out about the biofield anatomy, you want to know more about tuning, you're just curious, you can check out all of the different correlations that parts of your biofield have through this page up here for free. Very helpful charts that I made. I think they look pretty good too. So
they do look good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So if you want to get on this page and just scroll through it and learn more about it, there's a lot of testimonials as you go through. There's videos. There's Michelle. Michelle's healing home.
Shucks.
Places where I've talked about it with Eileen, and places where I've taught it. Some of my favorites. More resources externally. You can go through all that, and you can book a session through here. So I just wanted people to know that the sound healing page is much improved and is even a resource that you can learn from. And then I have to share this as a testimonial, if you will, from just the other day. My mouse is not cooperating. Hold on. Okay. All right. I gotta unfull screen this. Okay. I'm just gonna pull it up differently. All right. I just want you guys to see, like, this is a real email I got. Okay. So I got this email where she says, thank you for checking in. I definitely went through the valley of I suck, but remained neutral and came out the other side feeling pretty great. I feel like a water balloon that finally popped. Now, the valley of I suck, that is a thing of, processing old emotions and having to be careful about not, attaching a story to it and staying neutral about it. Then she says, one thing I didn't mention during the session or on your intake questionnaire was that I'd been dealing with a stage 2 uterine prolapse. I didn't mention it because my labor was 56 hours long and I pushed for hours at the end, so I felt like I earned it through this physically challenging experience. I've been doing therapy for the prolapse with very little results. Anyway, since our session, it has all but gone away. I can't tell you how effing awesome this is for me. Yay. Thank you so much for the healing. It went above and beyond my expectations. It was an honor to observe how you work, as well as I feel like I learned a lot. I'll be back for another session soon. So I wanted to share that because this is an awesome story how I didn't even know she was dealing with that health challenge. Yet the tuning still helped with it because we addressed the energy centers involved, and then the body's different parts are their blueprint is based on those energy centers. So getting those energy centers, in this case is like sacral root stuff, back into a proper balance or better balance, then the body was able to regulate that problem much easier and almost instantly. She says, her exact words, it has all but gone away. And I knew that she'd given birth over a year ago, so she must have been dealing with that for quite a while. So I just thought that was an amazing story. While I had this captive audience, I wanted to share that with everybody before we get back into Lord Shiva explaining the secrets for the initiated.
Nice. Great updates, dude, to the site. And congrats on 10K, too, on YouTube. That's awesome.
Super exciting.
Oh, yeah. You noticed and pointed that out before I did. Yeah, we finally got to 10,000. Kind of thought I'd be there by about March this year, but it's all good. We're doing it. We're doing it. I'm excited.
No, for sure. I'm kind of surprised that you didn't reach it way sooner, honestly. The caliber of guests and everything else, I hate to say shadow ban stuff or manipulated numbers or whatever, but you know what I mean? It makes me wonder.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's this is I always say, and maybe I'm programming things, but I always say this is the quality over quantity audience. This is the deep end people. This is like where we go straight to the best part of the stuff, or we skip through the things that are obvious or that you would have figured out on your own. Most of the audience is people who are either researchers or practitioners or healers, or like they're doing the thing, or they're almost there. We're just not the basic wide scattershot type of content. I'm cool with that. But that being said, I know there are many thousands more people that are on that level and more every day. So it's really, we depend on you guys in the audience to be my marketing and let people know about our awesome content here.
Definitely.
Oh, cool. This is a great comment. Theraphase Biofield Tuning. Thank you for leading me to practitioner training after watching your interview with Eileen. Oh, that's so good. Awesome. And now you got a channel with the title Biofield Tuning in it. You're probably tuning people. That's what it's about. As much as I love doing it, I want to see more people doing it because I think it's like kind of like the birthright aspect of this Shivambu stuff, like knowing your biofield anatomy and how to address it. It should be like in the human life owner's manual that doesn't exist.
Right.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Back to the stream.
Yeah. Right. Okay, cool. So yeah, I think we went over all of that. I don't know if you had anything else to add, but
we kind of went through that.
Yeah, we did. So you can move on to the next slide. Right. So here are some interesting verses about how it should be done. And so I can read this here. Such a trained man gets up in the early morning when 3/4 of the night has passed, stands facing the east, and passes urine. What rises in the east, right? Verse 7, the first and concluding flow of the urine is to be left out, and the intermediate flow of urine is to be collected. This is the best method. The follower of the therapy should only use his own urine. It is called Shivambu. However, just as the mouth and the tail of the serpent contain poison, similarly, the first and the concluding flow of urine are not wholesome. And so, again, the serpentine dynamic here, I think, is really fascinating that it's
the winter months.
The winter months? Ah, right. There you go.
So there's death in part of the snake. That makes so much sense. Wow, that's actually a big deal.
It is. I mean, when I was reading this section of the book, I said, for most of this book, every line was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. But this Tantra in particular really, really solidified a lot of things for me. And I highly recommend people, even if you just buy the Golden Fountain to read this Tantra, I mean, I just highly recommend it because there's a lot of nuggets in there for sure.
Yeah. So when she mentioned that
makes so much sense.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. I'm like, wow, okay. So again, there's more nuance here. It's not just go for it and whatever else. So anyway, so there's that. So verse 9 and verse 10, Shivambu is divine nectar. It is capable of abolishing old age and various types of diseases and ailments. The follower should first ingest his urine, then start his meditation. After getting out of bed, the face and mouth should be washed with water. Afterwards, one should drink one's own urine quite willingly and cheerfully. All the ailments subject to from the very birth will be completely cured. Wow. So divine nectar. It's so interesting. I know I brought up the Holy Grail and kind of the chalice and everything else. But what's fascinating to me, and the fountain too, the golden fountain, right? That's the name of this book, has an interface with Grail and chalice symbolism, which is pretty obvious. But what's interesting is that when you go back from my research, when you really think about and kind of like seek out the origins of like the Holy Grail and its different metaphors and myths and everything, it always contains the divine nectar. It contains the elixir of the gods, or it contains like the elixir of immortality or something along these lines. And so when people drink from a chalice and it's a celebratory thing, whether it's wine or alcohol or something else, symbolically, it's alluding to this divine nectar. It's alluding to this elixir of the gods, the original elixir of the gods. And so now with Shivambu here, with verse 9, Shivambu is divine nectar. Once again, it just makes me think if the original divine nectar is actually your own urine of all things, right? What a complete inversion that is, if that's the case. I just think it's all very interesting, all of these different connective sort of tissues here symbolically.
Yeah. This is great.
Yeah. So verse 14, 15, and 16. After 8 months, the human body will possess divine luster like that of shining gold, which will be permanent. After 9 months of continual use, tuberculosis and leprosy will perish. After 10 months of continual use, the follower becomes practically the treasury of luster and brightness. After 11 months, the follower becomes pure, both externally and internally. After 1 year of continual use, the follower acquires solar shining. After 2 years, the follower can conquer the element of earth.
And the interesting thing about this conquering of the element of earth, the following verses, all through it starts at verse 11 through verse 21, it's talking about the conquering of each element. So the longer you go, you're going to then be able to conquer the element of air, fire, water, ether. And that was another thing. It was just blowing my mind. And I was thinking about the word conquer and thinking like, well, that sometimes can have like a negative connotation, like you're conquering something or whatever. But it's almost like, I feel like it's like more thinking of it, you'll be coming to terms with these elements or be able to have balance with the sometimes imbalance that comes from the elements. So you might be too watery, maybe you're too emotional, maybe you're too earthy, speaking from personal experience. So this sort of metaphor of you're going to be transformed to a certain point in your life where you're going to be able to deal with or balance these elements within your life with grace and ease. And I think that is such a beautiful thing. And it makes sense just from the small amount of time we've been doing it and seeing these sorts of behaviors in my own self and being able to manage stress, manage anger or something like that better after consuming the Shivambu. It makes all the sense of the world.
Yeah. You guys are only 3 months away from finally curing Mario's rampant leprosy.
Yeah, right, exactly. Thank God.
I know, right? Yeah, we've been waiting for that.
I wonder if it's a translation thing, but conquering reminds me of mastering. And it kind of reminds me of like the magician card.
Well, what it says literally is leprosy will perish. So you're really killing the leprosy.
Right, true. But conquering the element of earth, air, ether, whatever, the magician has his table in front of him and he has an object for each element. And so part of the magician's thing is to have a intimate relationship with all the elements, to master all of the elements, to conquer all of the elements, so that he can use those elements in his toolkit, because this is the sandbox where the elements play.
Right.
You know, so that's kind of how I personally kind of symbolically, you know, interpret it.
Makes sense.
Right on. But I think it's so cool. I mean, like, this is a whole system. It's not just, there's not nothing here. There's more here than even what we're kind of presenting. So I think that's pretty interesting and intriguing. And when there's a tradition attached, I'll just say, like, the older I get, the more I read, the wiser I get. I'm more interested in things that are traditional, things that actually have some sort of tradition, that actually has some sort of foundation, you know, versus the latest and greatest, newest sort of trend or whatever bandwagon people are jumping on. And so I've really come to honor, in my own way, I guess, more sort of like traditional values and things that are actually steeped in something that actually has roots. You know, that's become more and more important to me. So hearing all of this stuff in this book, it really was very interesting to me, validating and all of that. Oh yeah,
Especially
here we go.
Secret traditions.
Yeah, right. Right. So here we go. This is the alchemical symbol for urine. And I scanned this from a book that I have full of alchemical symbols. And I was like, this is pretty interesting. It's very structured water, right? Obviously, it looks like a crosshatch. There's a circle in the middle. So the center is emphasized, and there is such a grounding, centering thing to this practice that, to me, that makes a lot of sense. So that is the sacred center that I always go on about, from which everything emanates and returns to. To me, God, there's so much that you can talk about with this, because it's very, very simple, but in its simplicity, it's like brilliant as well, right? And so you have the squaring with the crosshatch, but then you have the circle itself. And so to me, the center is always like the point of transcendence, just like the middle of the cross or something along these lines. There's a relationship to the number 9 as well here, relationship to the number 4, arguably relationship with the number 5 with that 5th point in the middle, just like the middle of the cross. And so, yeah, I mean, this could almost be like a whole entire mini sort of decoder breakdown. But I know when you saw
why
this,
would
you got
there? I
pretty
mean,
excited too.
the fact that there's even a symbol for it.
Right.
You know, there's only so many alchemical symbols.
Right.
It's not like they have it for every last thing in the world.
Right.
So that's
Exactly.
profound.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, this was definitely one of those paradigm shifting moments when Mario showed me this, because so many things flooded into my mind and heart, and what you're talking about too, Chance, of like, okay, well, clearly this was highly regarded to the alchemists of old, and this, to have its own symbol, is very meaningful. And one of the things that I think of with this, I do think of the sacred center and the groundedness, as Mario was talking about, but I think of that that thought of that, even though, you know, we are around people, we have multiple people in our lives, we may have, you know, partners and friends and community and stuff, but at the end of the day, we are by ourselves. We are alone, and in a positive way. And to me, this symbol really just like shines with that. And also kind of like, it's always up to you. Like, it's your decision to do that thing, to change your life, to finally, whatever it is that you may have been waiting to do, it's always going to be up to you. And there's nothing that anyone else is going to do to change your mind, or to convince you that it's time, or to tell you that you need to shape up, or what have you. And it's always up to you. It's like your decision to heal, your choice. It's going to be up to you if you really want to do that. You can have all the modalities in the world. You can buy all the sessions. You can go to all the doctors. But if you're not ready, and you're not ready to commit to the healing, or you're not ready to commit to get clean, or whatever that thing is, it's like you're kind of like end up spinning your wheels, because you haven't really committed to yourself. And that symbol really brings that through for me really strongly. And whenever I see it, that's like the first thing I think of, actually, is that it's up to you, and that you're going to be the one to make these changes and do it to it.
Well, this also begs for a further study of like the use of urine in alchemical process.
Yes.
Just doing a quick scan about it, I found that that's how phosphorus was even discovered as an element, was through somebody pursuing like the alchemical process described in some text, and that they got phosphorus, and so that's involving urine. So we know like what a powerful element that is for growth and life, and how that relates to the idea of light. Phosphorus is like that word etymologically encodes light. But what you're saying, Michelle, is extremely important, that the most important thing in the process of healing or regenerating or finding balance is the decision to do it. Like the real concrete decision to do it, because you can take all kinds of actions half-heartedly and they won't get you anywhere. And like that's part of what gets people the bad reputation with holistic stuff, is that most people will have at least at first approach a holistic modality from the same mindset that they were approaching the allopathic treatments, which is, I just want you to do the thing for me or give me the thing for me that fixes it. But what makes the only way that holistic stuff works is if it's like a whole being level shift. But that being said, there is something to like, even if because part of what makes it hard to do the healing is like, well, how do I get my heart from half-hearted to full-hearted? And so there are things that are steps along the way, and that's why you try lots of different stuff. And each time that you take the symbolic action or a very concrete and definite action towards the healing, you're helping your heart open or unblock just a little further towards the 100% commitment to the healing. And that's why people can help along the way too, is to show you like, well, this is where your limiting belief is that's keeping you from fully stepping through the portal of 100% whole self commitment. So the urine Shivambu thing does seem like a really easy, inexpensive way to consistently take a symbolic action, informational action that gives you the feedback of constantly, repetitively, the feedback of, I am healing, I am regenerating, I am whole, I am doing what I need to do for myself for what's best. It seems really important.
Yeah, no, you totally got it, man. The thing with that glyph that I was going to mention too is, one of the classic sort of symbolic things that you'll eventually learn if you look into it is that the heavens are oftentimes considered to be spherical or round or circular, and it's the earth that is considered to be more square-like or related to a cross or the number 4 or something along these lines. So I think that there's like this inner heaven sort of thing, or this inner holy of holies sort of thing with this symbol. And the other thing that I think is fascinating too is there's actually 3 layers from outer to inner. And it kind of reminds me, the first example I always think about is Solomon's Temple. But like Solomon's Temple has like a courtyard, and then you go into the building, and then within that building there's a sacred sort of space, and then within that there's like another space, and then the Holy of Holies or something along those lines. But as you get further to the middle of this sanctuary, the energy is more divine and more etheric and everything else, and so much so that nobody could just enter it. You had to be on like a special diet, supposedly. I don't even know if Solomon's Temple even existed, but I'm just using the metaphors and the mythology behind it, right? But I kind of see that with this symbol too, of there's this external space, and then there's an internal space with that inner square, but then even within that space there's another internal space, right? And so this holy of holies sort of idea, this sacred center kind of dynamic, and this medicine is literally coming from within you. And so I've been kind of referring to it as just internally between us as like primordial medicine or even polar medicine. It's coming from that central pole, you know. And so this is more of an ancient sort of way of doing things, and understanding that your inner landscape plays a big deal. So once again, if you can get past the sort of grotesque sort of thing that you've learned your whole life about what urine is, it's really healing in and of itself, literally just the act of consuming it, because it's probably, in my estimation, what your ancestors were doing, your great ancestors or whatever. Who knows, maybe people were consuming it not that long ago, actually.
Yeah.
You know, but it's just been kind of scrubbed from history. Right. So it's fascinating to me when we look at the potential correspondence here with the tarot. And Temperance came through so strongly for me that this is a card that actually potentially has some sort of relationship here. Notably, the vessels that are creating this looping dynamic back and forth, you know? And so you're pouring from one vessel to the other. I think it's really interesting. I've always noticed this. You'll see this in older tarot cards, that the stream usually divides the angel in half. And so that's what you see here. I think it's kind of fascinating that you have that stream dividing this person in half from higher to lower. I've always seen this as a very interesting relationship with the sign that it corresponds with as well, which is Sagittarius. And you have the higher nature of the human, and then you have the lower nature of the horse. So half man, half animal. So that to me is an interesting correspondence. But the fact that she is also wearing, or this angel is also wearing, like, I don't even know what it's called. We were supposed to look it up before we got on here.
Oh, yeah.
But you know the medical disc that doctors used to wear around their heads? I don't know if you know the name of that. It was kind of like, I believe it's meant to reflect light, if I'm not mistaken.
I know what you're talking about. Don't know what it was called.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it's called, but it looks like the circumpunct here, right? Which is also very interesting because the circumpunct is the symbol for the sun as well in astrology. And so there's like a medical thing going on here. And then also this angel has 1 foot in the water and then 1 foot outside of the water as well. So kind of like, I always look at it as like, these are your waters, basically, whether you're talking about the Temperance card or you're talking about the Star card as well, because that's another dynamic with the Star card that you see all the time, is that oftentimes she's either like, she's kneeling down and one leg is in the water, one leg is out, or sometimes she's like completely submerged in the water, her lower half at least. And so to me, this could symbolically, you know, reference your waters, basically. You were even talking about the whole dynamic of water and the cycle of water, basically, of, you know, it being in the streams and in the rivers and then evaporating and then coming back down. It's this whole cyclical sort of thing. In one of my tarot books, that's what the author was talking about the whole entire time with the Temperance card. And he was basically relating our weather cycles, especially water, and this cyclical nature of water as basically being like an alchemical sort of lab in the heavens, pretty much, you know, always churning, always moving, always, you know, doing its thing. And that the waters being poured from one cup to the other is kind of potentially, you know, symbolic of that. And so I think
Well, just think too, like the whole Sagittarian aspect of long distance travel. And like water travels the whole globe. It's always traveling. So there's that. And I've always found a strong correlation in, you know, there's like what people say about tarot cards, and then there's personal practice. And with a lot of experience, the Temperance card really powerfully represents the recuperative ability, or you know, a reversal of that potentially, depending on how it shows up. But you know, like if we're seeing the symbolism of Shivambu here, and the recuperative ability is a really powerful expression that this card holds, is makes a lot of sense to me.
Right. No, exactly. No, that's an excellent point for sure. That's in play. And then also too, just notice the fact that I think that what potentially is being alluded to with the wings in this version of the card is another chalice. You know, it looks like it's creating another chalice sort of dynamic, another cup, right? And so the angel's head is literally within that cup as well. And so, so there's potentially 3 cups kind of going on here. This card is well known for corresponding with alchemy as well, as we'll see in the next card, which is the Thoth version of this card. And so literally on that rainbow, I'm sure we've talked about this at some point. I'm sure you're already aware of this too. But what is being said in that rainbow basically is the expansion of vitriol, right? So Vitriol. We can fast track to the next slide if you want, but vitriol is like an acronym for an alchemical process. So when you actually translate what vitriol means, it's basically visit the interior parts of the earth and thou shalt find the hidden stone. And one of the recent translations that I came across was a little more expanded, but it's by going within and rectifying yourself, you will heal physically, emotionally, and mentally and become a bridge connecting heaven and earth, right? And I think that that's our role as humans here as well, is we are the bridge between heaven and earth. Sometimes it's referred to as the Great Triad. This is what it was referred to in the Eastern world. That's my understanding, is that there's a triune relationship between heaven, earth, and man. We are symbolically that bridge in so many different ways. And so this hidden stone dynamic is interesting because it could also mean the hidden medicine, the hidden thing, or even the philosopher's stone too. I've seen other translations where people believe that that's actually what's being referred to here, this hidden stone, this philosopher's stone. And so to me, it's fascinating that vitriol has 7 letters. The number 7 is a well-known correspondence with this whole alchemical sort of process. 7 layers to the innermost sanctum, 7 layers, 7 veils to the great beyond, 7 traditional planets. This card once again corresponds with Sagittarius. There's a whole interesting deep dive with Sagittarius and the rainbow, the 7 colors of the rainbow. Once again, vitriol is literally written on the rainbow behind the main figure. And so I see vitriol and Sagittarius as it relates to Chiron, by the way, Chiron being the wounded healer, relating to all of this sort of business. So in some versions of the Sagittarius myth, Chiron literally is Sagittarius. Chiron was represented in the heavens as Sagittarius. And then again, Sagittarius being what? The hunter, the archer. So we're coming, like, it's a full sort of complete cycle or loop with everything that we're kind of referring to here, with Shivambu and Urine being the hunter. And as I mentioned off air, I believe, before we got into the live stream, I've kind of been calling this Mercurian as well, because there's so many mercurial aspects to Urine. And the arrow itself has been referred to in some esoteric circles as just another glyph of Mercury. Mercury relates to the phallus and the pole and the column and the pillar and everything else. Mercury is a mover, he's a traveler, he's a messenger. And so there's so many things going on there. Mercury being the psychopomp, and Sagittarius, older versions of Sagittarius being a psychopomp as well. He used to have wings in the Babylonian version, Pabalsog. And so I see, temperance and all of the things that it associates with is potentially being like the most potent sort of correspondence for this practice here, Shivambu.
The one of the secret meanings of the arrow in the ancient symbolism is also the mariner's magnetic needle, the compass, which was definitely known by the priests for ages before the alleged discovery by Marco Polo in 1260. And there's examples of that, like the miracle story of Hercules sailing across the ocean in a vase guided by the arrow of Apollo. So a lot of times when you hear arrow or see the arrow symbolism, one of the things that it's representing is the actual compass, back to the navigatory aspect of Sagittarius, which is symbolized by what? The arrow, or, it's right there.
That's so perfect, man. I love that. That makes so much sense. Because obviously the compass points where? To the north, and then the north being the symbolic center of Earth, by my estimation. And then that being like, the center. It's just like the bullseye or something. X marks the spot, if you will. There's even an X in the arrow.
And then, of course, the savior deity in the pagan system was Eros.
Ah,
Eros is more like a title than a like. I syncretize all these guys. I think they're all the same dude, the same
Oh, yeah.
same
Yeah.
system, right? So Eros is the erotic love, the spark that jumps between the poles, the gap between heaven and earth. That's us. It's a center idea. It's the obviously the regenerative power or the generative power, because without without arrows, there's going to be no like the species will cease to exist. We won't continue. We need that.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And that's
One of
the same member that the Auryn comes from is where the Eros is felt.
You know, it's funny. There was an article I meant to read that someone passed along to us, and it's the Cupid symbolism of all these Cupids urinating, and how there's like fountains where like the Cupid cherub angel babies are peeing like into the fountain, right? That's where the water's coming from, and the symbolic decode of what that represents too. And I'm like, oh my gosh, is there something going on here with Shivambu or something along these lines?
Gotta be.
Yeah, I'm thinking so.
I know, like, and there's so much. The first thing people jump at is just like, it's perverted. They're PDF files, and
Right.
I'm not saying that doesn't exist, but you can't just paint entire traditions and entire groups with one brush. Every group of people has the whole spectrum of humanity in it. So, what to one person could mean something totally disgusting and gross could, from another angle, a higher level, or another person involved with it, mean something entirely more evolved and elevated. Totally.
Right. Yeah, exactly. One of the things I have to mention as well, just because, you know me, the whole thing, I've read that 14 relates to Ursa Major and Minor, in that they each have 7 stars combined, and that each one is a dipper. And when you pay attention to the circulation, to the circumambulation of these constellations, they're basically pouring from one to the other. So when one reaches kind of an apex or whatever, it's going to pour liquid into the other one that catches it, and then that one's going to circle around and then pour into the next one. And so that's kind of intriguing as well, because this is the 14th card of the Major Arcana. And then you mentioned Yod-Hey Vav-Hey earlier, I believe, right? But that's on the gown of the angel there, just above that orange triangle, which I'm sure you're probably aware of, or we've talked about at some point.
Yeah, buddy. Yeah,
Nice.
buddy. And that word, one of the meanings of that word is life and existence. So we're talking about the closure of cycles, but not in the closure like the end of a cycle, but as in, the loop is closed, the cycle, which is what allows a cycle to happen. If a cycle isn't closed, then it's not a cycle. It falls off the rails, so to speak. So that's one of the things going on here too.
Nice. Yeah, definitely. Did you have anything to add here?
I mean, I think a lot of it just, for me, this end section, it just really drives everything home. Kind of like you were saying, it really is like this complete circle, this complete loop of kind of proving the things that we've been talking about the whole time, that the answers lie within, and these waters, our sacred waters, are a huge part of the equation to the healing that we can all achieve, really. So, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with all this stuff.
Nice.
Well, this was the most convincing conversation on the subject that I've ever witnessed or participated in. I know I've kind of moved over to y'all's side from the beginning, because I see how it's working for you, and I love and trust y'all. But now, after just thinking about all the angles and how it just perfectly fits with a harmonious worldview, a centropic worldview, the crystal worldview. This is cool. I'm super interested. And I'm going to check out that book too, because I want to know all the ins and outs and the do's and don'ts. There's a couple questions, if you guys have just a minute to maybe answer, from chatters.
Sure. Yeah.
And this quote here, I'll just read this quote. Urine therapy confronts us with a very concrete healer within, which works both on a mechanistic and energetic level. The latter implies that urine, as a holographic substance, can affect all levels of being from the physical through the electromagnetic fields of emotion in the mind, up to the subtler, generic vibrational information of the soul. Man, I like how he's writing.
Yeah, same. I know. I want to hear what you have to say after you read the book because again, it was a mind blower every page, and these sorts of things coming through. It made so much sense. Every single thing I read, it was just making more sense, confirming it further, and then correlating it to mine and Mario's experiences and what we've been going through. It is everything just lines up. It's like, yeah, that's exactly what's happening. I can feel it. I feel it. I see it. It's evolving every single day. I swear, man, I have learned. I mean, I feel like I try and learn something about myself like every single day. But I'll say since incorporating the Shivambu, it is a guaranteed multiple lessons coming through, multiple chances for reflection in the way that I approach the world and myself and people and thoughts and everything else. It has just like really become crystallized, no pun intended, I guess, but sort of at the same time, that this is the way forward in so many ways. And it just, also too, I don't feel the need, just like I don't feel the need anymore to like quote unquote wake people up or prove something to them. So by no means either do I think that this is a practice for everyone. This takes it might not be time for everybody to do this, just like with everything else, we all come to these conclusions at our own times and we're on our own journey. And I think the Shivambu is kind of a testament to that too, of, do it in the capacity you feel is best for you. And it's a very intuitive practice as well. So if you end up feeling like, I just want to apply it topically, and you're okay with that, and you're seeing results, and you don't even get to the point of wanting to consume it, great. Then it's a topical journey for you, and you are definitely going to get things from that. Just like we all know, our skin is our largest organ. So you are going to absorb all those things that you might not need to consume it, or it might be something else for you. So use your intuition with it, and don't let your fears or your programming get in the way, but also just tune in and know if you're ready for it or not. And it's okay if you are, it's okay if you aren't, That's what I keep kind of reminding myself of too when I'm thinking about this and talking about it more publicly, of it not being this pressurizing thing of like, you have to do this because this is the way. It's like, well, it might be not the way for everybody, and that's okay too.
Yeah, but I really enjoyed our live chatters. I swear, this may be the only time in the history of the world that an over 2-hour conversation about Shivambu has had one comment that was maybe slightly negative. And it was just one comment that said, I'll pass. That was it. There was no other negative thing said.
Bravo.
Which is amazing. And I guarantee most of the people here probably haven't actually tried it themselves, but nobody's hating. Everyone's open-minded. Everyone's in for the gravy, having a good time. That's the quality over quantity that we have in this channel. That's mind-blowing, man. It's so good. The vibe is so good. You guys are the best. I love it. And there's a super cool comment here from Care Bear. To ourselves, we are the voice of God. So urine therapy, having traversed the entire terrascape and then giving thanks while giving it back as purified, is a beautiful thing. Super cool.
Yeah, here.
Gabe up here, Slick Dissonant, he is succumbing to the peer pressure. Very solid presentation. I'm convinced, but I'll wait for the urine agency of irregularity to take the Yellowstone leap. That's all good.
Nice, Gabe.
So a couple comments. Just want to ask these two. Claire asks, any thoughts about not doing Shivambu during intense detoxing, like ingesting turpentine?
That's a good question. I think that would be an intuitive thing for you, because I think that basically what happens too, and I've learned this with that question of if you're on like pharmaceutical drugs or what have you, depending on what you're on, there could be a length of time that you wait after you consume the turpentine. So maybe you have your turpentine detox or whatever you're consuming with the turpentine, and you wait maybe 2 hours before you were to consume your Shivambu. And the same thing goes with even food. In his book, The Golden Fountain, he talks about you're best off if you are going to be consuming your urine throughout the day, wait like an hour to an hour and a half after you've eaten, because then like a lot of, if there was like a sugar spike or a salt spike or whatever, that's going to diminish as your body processes it and you give it some time. So I also do believe too, and in personal experience and from research, when you are in a detox mode, that's a really great time to actually have the urine, because the urine is going to actually help accelerate and process the detox even quicker. And that was my experience with this last detox that I did go through in June. I had that moment of like, should I be consuming it during this time because it's clearly detoxing me, and then am I going to be getting any of the negative elements of this detox? And I had the strong pull to just keep consuming it. And then the more research I was doing and how I was feeling about it, turns out that that is a great time to actually be consuming it, because of what I said earlier too, of when you start to consume your urine, your kidneys start producing more. So if you were to consume
it aids the detox.
Exactly. And then if you were to consume it while you were having the turpentine, your body is going to produce more urine to continuously flush that out. So maybe, as I said, you choose intuitively a time, a time frame that you feel safe with, and experiment with it like that. Or if you didn't feel comfortable consuming it,
and you can just take a sip.
Yes.
It's like the homeopathic aspect of it. You just get the information feedback. You don't have to be chugging the whole stream, and just catch a little in the middle and try that. That's
exactly.
I'm really, what helped a lot was to find out I don't got to do a whole jug.
A whole big gulp. Yeah.
I can just I don't have to chug like this whole thing full of urine.
No.
That didn't work out so well for Mario over here. So my experimentation is going to be small and slow, and just see how that goes.
It's a great way to start. And we have a great friend, Regina, who, when we brought the urine therapy up to her and was talking to her about our experience, she was talking about when she had practiced it herself, and some of the teachers she was learning from were talking about just literally doing a drop under your tongue, so as little as that being enough. And yeah, there was another thought, but it escaped me. But regardless, that's my thoughts on that.
I'll say,
cool.
To kind of ease yourself into it too, one of the things that you learned, I believe through Megan McDonald, was what she learned from one of her teachers by urinating on her hand, right?
Oh, yes.
And she said what you can do is just start just urinating on your hand, in the shower, and you'll notice the difference in the skin.
Yeah.
It's softer. And then also, if you're more brave than that, and I enjoy this now, because you can really feel the sensation of urinating in your hand and then putting it on your face. You feel like this tingly, sort of vibrant sensation, and so it's very palpable. It's real. It's not like a sort of woo energetic thing. There are things like that with it too, but I think that would be potentially enough for some people to kind of start seeing the benefits of it, or at least just to kind of like, lightly jump into this. So I agree. I think slow and steady is the way to go. This is one of those things where it seems to me everybody that tries it, they don't stop. Like, it's just one of those things where it seems like once you're on board, I'm sure there are people who have stopped, but it seems like
you want to get
people...
to that 2-year mark and conquer the earth.
yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
You still want to at least check that out.
You have the rest of your life, to be able to do it. So I don't think there's any reason why anybody should kind of rush in at all.
Now, what about topically? Using it topically, would that be you would or would not dilute it? And would there be any concern about detox from topical, like for a pregnant person?
Great question. Yes, during pregnancy, topical best to dilute it. So you could do like a 50% dilution. That is something that's recommended in his book, as well as through other sources that I've looked into. So that is something to keep in mind. Topical can bring on a detox for sure. I experienced that myself, as I talked about with the my legs, the rashes on my legs. Like, it was definitely bringing that up. And that's when I was really, really leaning into the topical use, actually. Like taking a shower and then literally massaging myself with urine, which is another practice that you can look into. And there is an ancient Indian practice of that as well. And that is when I was having those reactions and I was noticing that detox coming through the skin. So something to definitely be aware of for sure.
Okay, cool. So, and then with pregnancy, the most important thing is what's comfortable for mama. So if you're like not a full 100% cool about it, just hold off. You got your whole life to know about this. And last question, 2 questions. I think the first one's quick. Wanted to know about aged. Annie does, and PK wants to know about uses around the house. Can I clean my oven with urine? So how to make it aged, and can I clean my oven? Uses around the house.
Yeah, great questions.
Oh, wait. And also Gabe wants to know if he can get his foreskin back. Sorry, dude.
Okay.
It's not happening.
Yeah, it might not happen, but you should try. You never know, man. You may be the anomaly.
Yeah, you got to go take that up at, there's like an office for that. And you have to put in some paperwork, and they've got it in a drawer somewhere. They'll return it to you.
Oh, man. Yeah. The aging of it is, yes. So best way to do it, get yourself a clean jar and whatever size you want. You can, what I've been doing, what we've been doing, I've been saving it in a jar and I just have it left open, like with cheesecloth over it. And it's going to kind of off gas. It's going to evaporate. It's going to go through different phases of scents. So you'll notice that as well. And you can also then cover it. It's entirely up to you because it's a sterile liquid. As long as your jar is sterile and clean, there should be no harm or no issues with growth of anything weird. You might end up seeing that there's like layers that start to form within the urine. So there'll be like a sediment that forms at the bottom. And then with mine, I noticed that there was like a thin layer of crystals that started to form, which was really interesting to me as it evaporated. And then the aging of it, I've also had experience with just like even aging it for like 4 days. And then that's when I was using it topically for healing. So from as short a period as 4 days till people have jars of urine that are years and years old, and as Mario was saying about Amanda Vollmer talking about that and storing it for emergency purposes, it gets darker with age as well. That's something else to be aware of. And, I feel like the aged urine too, not to just continue going on, cause we have been rolling here for a while, but I definitely used like a neti pot with aged urine when I was trying to flush out the remaining mucus. And I will say, go real slow with the aged urine. I had a pretty intense situation with that. It was healing all right, but it was quite painful in terms of just like I had a headache, almost like sinus headachy feeling very raw in there for a while. And that went on for a few hours. But as soon as that detox left me, I felt like amazing. And the sinuses cleared, everything kind of...
Swished your brain with pee?
Oh my gosh. It was really intense.
Whoa.
And I did it before an interview. And that was that was something that I learned. And I thankfully made it through the interview, and it wasn't super intense, but it was as soon as the interview ended, bam, it hit me. And I was like, whoa. I remember standing in our living room for a second being like, holy smokes. Wow, this is intense. So just a word for the wise, go slow as we're talking about specifically with the aged urine. It just becomes more potent, which is why it would be used for emergency situations. If you were dealing with something very terminal or something that really knocked you off your feet, that's where you're going to be using that in small doses.
Right on.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I think we're there. I think we did it.
Yep.
We talked about it, and I wondered if we had 2 hours out of this, and I was like, it's okay if it's a little shorter, but no, we have plenty. And I feel energized by this talk. I always do from hanging out with you guys. And Michelle, I know you're taking a little break from the healing home as you get ready for the two of y'all's fabulous wedding. Congratulations about that. What month is it going to be in?
It's going to be in September. So September 14th. Cool. I proposed during Virgo season last year, and there's a ton of bridal symbolism that relates to Virgo. I wasn't intentionally
falling
doing
in
that.
love.
All sorts of things. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, totally. And so I was like, you know what? Virgo is like the perfect sign, I think, for the bride. And so anyway, so we decided to do Virgo again. So we waited a whole entire year. But yeah, I'm excited for her break too, just to be able to do her thing and then plan for it and everything else.
Yeah. It's a good time, and just time to even reevaluate the healing home and the direction that I want to go and the place that I feel in the world with this information. And I swear, man, the Shivambu has brought me to that decision as well. It's like bringing up all these things like the reevaluation, where's your heart at? Where's your heart center with this information and what you're putting out there in the world? And so I give gratitude to the Shivambu for that as well, because it's actually really helped me to kind of get to that point and then being able to even make the decision. And Mario really helped me with that one too. So yes, but I'll still be around. You can email me, message me, talk to me. It's all good. So yeah. Thank you, Chance.
Awesome.
As always.
And I'm sure we'll see you back on a Vibrant someday.
Oh yeah.
September's not that far off. So you guys just think, if you want to talk about anything, you guys can always come on. I mean, we've gone as taboo as possible, I think, with this subject. So really nothing's off limits. I'm always down to hang. You guys can check out Mario at symbolicstudies.com. He's got a great TikTok. He's on YouTube. He does so much excellent work on his Patreon currently for subscribers. I'm subscribed there myself. And Michelle's Healing Home, even if she's taking a break, you can catch her whole catalog, history of really helpful health content, super good stuff. And you guys got anything else you want to say to the folks before you hit the big red end button?
No, just thanks for hanging out. Thanks for listening. I wish you all well on your potential Shivambu journey. The craziest thing about it, I think, one of the most amazing things about it is you can start right now. For the vast majority of people.
I have to pee right now.
Right. Yeah. Same here. That was one of the most exciting things for me, where I just decided one evening, we talked about it, and I'm like, I think tomorrow morning is going to be the first time. And I did it. The first time was the hardest time. After that, it's been smooth sailing on these golden waters, relatively. I had things I had to adjust and whatever else. But to me, that is one of the most powerful things about it is you produce it. You don't need to buy it. You don't need a coupon code. You don't need to go to the doctor. You don't need to do any of these types of things. It's like it's the most immediately present, available medicine just for you. So I think that's really, really cool.
Yeah, I second.
I love
that.
it.
Yeah,
that just fits my worldview perfectly. That's right, the healed worldview.
For sure.
All right, well, we'll get out of here. Love y'all. Thanks for hanging with us. It's been great to see all of you chatters hanging for the whole time and being so cool and kind and engaged with this subject. Y'all are the best. See y'all next time.
Bye-bye.
Nice.